How about now? Does that sound better? Sorry, asking Dave in the thing. I just realized that I didn't turn something up that I should have, and just realized that. All right. And as you can notice, level sound okay, or do I need to come down a bit? But as you may have noticed, I'm in a different location in my room now. I actually have a desk. So, and with the desk, I actually managed to get a secondary monitor so I can split things up and make it a little easier for me to do the show and whatnot. Okay. So, as I was saying, before I found out that I had no audio, it's been a wild week in politics, especially starting off early in the week with Trump and the Helsinki situation, the press conference with the Vladimir Putin. I'm not going to sit here and say that Trump is a traitor, treasonous traitor, or anything like that. I think he is I think he's playing to the crowd because, I mean, Helsinki is just a stone's throw from Russia. You know, you're going to placate your enemy and ask questions and make it seem like you're okay with it. But I bet you he actually has an idea of what Russia did in meddling with us and whatnot. But it is what it is. Anyways, I wanted to talk about more about it, but I just haven't had time to research. I'm actually in the middle of switching gears from communications class to an actual history class, a generic history class in school. So I'm a little far behind on my research. So I thought I'd just pull up one quick article this week and talk about that, which happens to be with the Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. And I'm going to give me just a second here. Got to get used to doing this dual screen without looking at the other screen as much. All right. Still going to do application window. Muttering to myself, what can I say? Go ahead. And what what it's about is Kavanaugh says the Watergate decision may have been wrong. This was filed earlier today, actually, by Mark Sherman of the Associated Press. Can you, by any chance, Dave, can you actually hear the fan that's going on right next to me? I'm assuming you can. Anyways, while I wait for that response, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh has suggested several years ago that the unanimous High Court ruling in 1974 that forced President Richard Nixon to turn over Watergate tapes leading to the end of his presidency may have been wrongly decided. Kavanaugh was taking part in a roundtable discussion with other lawyers when he said at 3 different points that the decision in U.S. v. Nixon, which marked limits on a president's ability to withhold information needed for a criminal prosecution, may have come out the wrong way. In 1999, a 1999 magazine article about the roundtable was part of thousands of pages of documents that Kavanaugh has provided the Senate Judiciary Committee as part of the confirmation process. The committee released these documents on Saturday, so today, the 21st. Oh, come on, you. All right. Kavanaugh believes in robust executive authority already is front and center with Kavanaugh's belief in a robust executive authority already is front and center in his nomination by President Donald Trump to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. The issue could have assumed even greater importance if Special Counsel Robert Mueller seeks to force Trump to testify in an ongoing investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. How did I know that was going to come up? Anyways, in all honesty, I don't know enough about Kavanaugh to know what to make an informed decision right here now, whether I think he would be a great replacement for Kennedy or not. The way I understand Justice Kennedy's position within the Supreme Court is he was pretty much a swing vote. He he would he would make his decisions based upon what he thought was right, and I know they all do that. I'm not saying they don't, but he didn't toe necessarily party line about every little thing. So, and since I haven't had a chance to research enough of Kavanaugh's beliefs um, and his political opinions on things, I'm not going to sit here at the end of this and try to say he's right or wrong, um, or he's the right replacement or not. That's for the Senate to decide. But I do think that I do think that if his beliefs on the Watergate tapes is accurate, and I'm gonna have to go see if I can find that, if they even have a link to the information, the article, um, I would think that this could go against Robert Mueller if Trump does, or if he does try to get Trump to testify. In all honesty, I think that Donald Trump, President Trump, I should actually be saying, should be testifying, but not necessarily have that information public right away. Um, the I'm kind of at a loss or torn between my opinion on this, simply for the fact that we have privacy to an extent as citizens, but it's not constitutionally guaranteed. We have the right to against unwarranted unwarranted searches and seizures of our property. But at the same time, where does that line exist? The burden of proof is on the prosecution to show that he or anybody is has given them probable cause to be searched through to search their property premises and whatnot. And I was seeing on my front page of my Saturday News Tribune and Seattle Times today that they were talking about how Cohen had recorded the conversations between him and President Trump about payments, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just one of those things. I'm just kind of torn at where is that line, and there is no hard and fast rule where that line is, in my opinion, because the burden of proof can be a gray area, I guess is the best way to put it. But anyways, going on with the article here. Quote, but maybe Nixon was wrongly decided. Heresy though it is to say so, Nixon took away the power of the president to control information in the executive branch by holding that the courts had power and jurisdiction in order to order the president to disclose information in response to a subpoena sought by a subordinate executive branch official. That was a huge step with implications to this day that most people do not appreciate sufficiently. Maybe the tension of the time led to an erroneous decision, end quote, Kavanaugh said in a transcript of the discussion that was published in February of 1999 issue of the Washington Lawyer. That's an interesting quote that they use here. That the case has given the courts the power and jurisdiction to order the president to disclose information in response to a subpoena brought by a subordinate executive branch official. Now, could that be I obviously wasn't around for Nixon. I was born in 81, but still, trying to wrap my mind around what he's trying to say here is that subordinate in the executive branch acting under the control of the president via the attorney general, or could it be like in the case of special counsel Robert Mueller, where they're working technically for a judicial wow, where they're working on a special project that is more closely related to impeachment, which wouldn't that necessarily be under the case of the legislature, not the executive branch? And at what point does your power or being the head of a entity make you exempt from the rule of law, specifically the rule of specific, not trying to say specifically of the rule, but like specifically in the case of following the laws of the land? You know, that's like trying to say the president could kill somebody and get away with it because he's the president, he's the head of the the attorney general, the Department of Justice. That's not by saying that none of his subordinates can actually investigate him or try him, etc., etc. I don't necessarily agree with that interpretation of how I'm reading this, but that is kind of at face value how I read it. I don't know what you guys think. Know what, Dave? Okay, that's what I understand that the Department of Justice is under the executive branch, but what I'm saying is when they work as a special counsel on an investigation, couldn't they, in theory, be working under the legislation during, let's say, like an impeachment investigation? At which point, that's what kind of what I'm getting at. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know specifics. So you have the lawyer connection there. Actually, I have a lawyer connection, but he's family court. Never mind. Anyways, lost my train of thought. um, but but again, what I'm trying to get at is at what point are you not able to be talked to by your subordinates and be told that you're doing something wrong? I mean, that's whether legally or ethically. At another point in this discussion, Kavanaugh said the court might have been wise to stay out of the tapes dispute. Quote, should U.S. v. Nixon be overruled on the grounds that the case was non-judiciable interbranch dispute? Maybe so. Kavanaugh, among 6 lawyers who took part in the discussion in the aftermath of the independent counsel Kenneth Starr investigation that led to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton, Kavanaugh had been a member of Starr's team. The discussion was focused on the privacy of discussions between government lawyers and their clients. Philip Larkova, who argued the Watergate Tapes case against Nixon and moderated the discussion, said Kavanaugh has long believed that in a strong presidency. Quote, that was Brett staking out what has been his basic jurisprudential approach since law school, Larkova said in a telephone interview on Saturday. Still, Larkova said it was surprising, even as the 1999, that the unanimous decision in the Nixon tapes case might have been wrongly decided. Now, I had a thought. I looked over at Dave's comments here. I understand what, Dave, you're saying, that the House conducts its own investigation with its own lawyers, like the Hillary Clinton investigation. I'm just, again, thinking out loud, and I'm I am well intended to agree that I am wrong in this case. So, but it is. It's just trying to wrap my head around this last paragraph. Still, Larkova said it was, quote, it was surprising, even as of 1999, that the unanimous decision in the Nixon tapes case might have been decided wrongly. I just, I don't think that it was decided wrongly, but at the same time, if you think of it from my point of view, my frame of reference as a left-leaning liberal, center-left, I don't think that the president should have supreme powers or be protected by extra privileges or extra powers that the average I don't want to say average government employee, but the average executive, high level executive person wouldn't have themselves within a company. But even that's not the right way to think about it either. Because, you know, a CEO can be compelled to speak, but and give over information about a case that they're involved in. But at the same time, the president is dealing with classified information more so than a CEO. So I mean, it's a murky point. It's a point that is hard to wrap my mind around per se, because taking Kavanaugh's point here that it could have been decided wrongly. I can kind of understand where he lies with this, where he stands with this, what he's making his decision based on. But let's continue on. Kavanaugh allies pointed to a recent and more favorable assessment of the Nixon case. Whether it's Marbury or Youngstown or Brown or Nixon, some of the greatest moments in American judicial history have been when judges stood up to the other branches, were not cowed, and enforced the law. That takes backbone, or what some call judicial engagement. Kavanaugh wrote in a 2016 Law Review article, and I should have quoted that, by the way, 2016 Law Review article in which he referred to several landmark Supreme Court cases. So, in 1999, among the pile of materials released in response to the committee's questionnaire, the 1999 article among the pile of material released in response to the committee's questionnaire, Kavanaugh was asked to provide information about his career as an attorney and jurist, his service in the executive branch, education, society memberships, and more. An opening that looked at a long paper trail that lawmakers will consider when as they decide whether to confirm him. A high court appointment could shift the court rightward for years to come. A longtime figure before I go on to the next one, I don't see a problem with having the court swinging back and forth between right and left. And I know people on the left and the progressive side are going to attack me for this. But in all honesty, I don't see a problem. I don't see a problem with that, because it allows us to correct any injustices. It's like swinging back and it's like a pendulum swinging back and forth, back and forth. Who's to say that we are making all the right decisions if we are a progressive left Supreme Court or even federal courts in general? Who's to say we are right? Who says we're going the correct path if we're a completely right-leaning conservative court system? It needs to balance for each other, just like politically with Congress and the White House. It needs to swing back and forth. And for a long time now, we've been going to the extremes on each side, that we haven't allowed for that pendulum to swing back and forth, back and forth. So Just keep that in mind for those of you on the left. Don't look at this necessarily as a bad thing just because Donald Trump appointed him. Like me, I need to go do some more research on Kavanaugh and his history to be able to decide, on my opinion, whether I think any of my senators should be, if they're part of the Judiciary Committee, needs to support him or not. So that's just my opinion of it. Take it or leave it if you want. So, a longtime figure in the Washington establishment, Kavanaugh acknowledged in the questionnaire that he has joined clubs that he said once had discriminatory membership policies. Years before I became a member of the Congressional Country Club and the Chevy Chase Club, it was my understanding those clubs, like most similar clubs around the country, may have excluded members on discriminatory basis that should not have been acceptable to people then and would not be acceptable now, he wrote. Well, there goes the progressives. They're going to hate him and lynch him just because he affiliates with clubs that at one point were discriminatory, and he needs to recompense for that. I'm not saying all progressives. We all know which ones I'm talking about. But in the grand scheme of things, the clubs have moved on. They have started allowing those that they discriminated against. We should do likewise. Asked to list the 10 most significant cases for which he sat as a judge, Kavanaugh cited 9 in which the position expressed, in my opinion, either for the court or in a separate writing, was later adopted by the Supreme Court. The 10th regarded a man fired by a mortgage giant Fannie Mae after he filed a discrimination complaint that alleged a company executive created a hostile work environment by calling the worker the N-word. No. Kavanaugh said that he included because of what it says about anti-discrimination law in American history. Kavanaugh said an appeals court panel on which he sat reversed a lower court's ruling in favor of Fannie Mae. He said he joined the majority of the opinion in 2013 and wrote a separate concurrence to explain that calling someone the N-word even once creates a hostile work environment. Well, that can offset the club point, I guess. I don't know. I'm just like, I honestly need to do more research on him, to be honest. But it is what it is. All right. In the questionnaire, Kavanaugh cited his opinion in that case, quote, "No other word in the English language so powerfully or instantly calls to mind our country's long and brutal struggle to overcome racism and discrimination against African Americans," end quote. But it was one of the relatively few discriminatory cases in which Kavanaugh sided with the complaining employee. Offering a timeline leading to his nomination, he said White House counsel Don McGahn called him the day Justice Anthony Kennedy announced his retirement, June 27th, and they met the next day. Trump interviewed him on July 2nd with McGahn present, and Vice President Mike Pence interviewed him on July 4th. Kavanaugh smoked by phone with the president on July 8th, and that evening met at the White House with Trump, his wife Melania, where he said he was offered and accepted the nomination. Asked whether anyone saw assurances from him about the stand that he might take on the specific case or issue, he answered, quote, "No," end quote. He also said that he had not offered any indication how he might rule as a justice, which is prudent in my opinion in any case on anything, is that you shouldn't tell people what your plans are because you don't know how you're going to judge something. Even I don't know how I'm going to judge something 5 minutes from now when I hear a change in the stories and the facts of something. It's very easy for us to sit here and say how we're going to do things based upon our understanding of things, but sometimes things change. And that's one thing I don't get, is why people try to find out how these people are going to try and judge something that they haven't heard. Or if they have heard it, they're going to, recuse themselves from being a part of that decision. So Kavanaugh has written some 300 rulings as an appeals court judge, and has a record in the George W. Bush White House, as well as in the Starr's probe of Clinton. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, the committee chairman, said the questionnaire was the broadest and most comprehensive ever sent by the committee, and he welcomed Judge Kavanaugh's diligent and timely response. Oh, they have the questionnaire and the supporting document links. I'll make sure to link those below as well. The nominee told lawmakers he registered for the Selective Service in his younger days, but did not serve in the armed forces. Years before he became a judge and complied a solidly conservative record, Kavanaugh also reflected on how past nominees have sometimes disappointed partisans who wanted a more liberal or conservative justice. Speaking on CNN in 2000, he responded to a question about whether the next president could pack the court, end quote, with like-minded justices. See you, Dave. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I'll make sure to get this sent off to you with the other shows soon. Presidents often prefer to avoid bloody confirmation fights, he said, in a transcript that was released Saturday. We have seen at that time and again, to pick the consensus pick who turns out to be the more moderate and thus less predictable. That's what happened, Kavanaugh said. And in all honesty, I really feel that this is how the justices of the Supreme Court should act. Just my personal belief is that we need to have justices that actually look at the cases and don't go along with their party lines, don't go along with their personal political ideology, but look at the rule of law as set by Congress, judge whether that's a fair law, whether it's been interpreted correctly by the lower courts or not correctly, and then make their decisions based upon that. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a Supreme Court justice. I've never been a judge. So how am I supposed to expect this of the justices if I don't know what it's like to be a justice? I mean, it's the only way I can do that is to study, to look at these cases and go back to their original hearings where we have records of those. So I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. If you don't know if you saw on my screen, and I will go back and share that really quick. Go back to application. I'm going to post these down in my down in the bottom part of my YouTube in the show notes. But here are the links to the questionnaire that Kavanaugh received and his supporting documents. But all in all, I think that Kavanaugh is, from what I've read so far, and I reserve the right to change my mind when I go back through and look through this, is that he sounds like a decent person and sounds like he understands what is required of him, and that he's not just going to show us or tell us what he wants us to hear. So, just to give you an idea, I've pulled up the links myself here. Let me hop back over here. I need to get a USB hub. All right. So here's his questionnaire, and it is 110 pages long. And then his supporting document as by link. So last action was received in the Senate, referred to the Committee Judiciary. So I'm actually looking forward to actually studying this and going forward. I'm not going to go all over this. I'm not going to go over all this on the show, but honestly, I think it'll be interesting. And I think you should, if you're going to try and decide whether you think Kavanaugh is worth it or not. Take a look at this. Actually, go and read the information. So, going back though to his decision. For those of you that are watching live, you saw Dave's comments, and again, I understand what he's saying, that the DOJ is under the executive department no matter what. I mean, I get that, and that the House has their own lawyers, does their own investigations. But at the same time, those lawyers have to use some sort of services, whether it's private detectives or private investigators themselves, or they're using city and state resources or whatnot. Again, I'm not an investigator. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly how this goes. So I'm not going to sit there and pretend that I know what. I'm not going to sit there and pretend that it's possible for the DOJ staff to do this. But I want to think back about this in the sense of where he give me just a second. The one line in his quote from the Washington Lawyer article, The Round Table, is that Nixon took away the power of the president to control information in the executive branch by holding that the courts had the power and jurisdiction to order the president to disclose information in response to a subpoena sought by a subordinate executive branch official. Well, if the FBI is investigating something and it leads to you as the president, why should you have power over that investigation? I honestly, in my opinion, think that should stop at that point altogether. I don't know about the rest of you. Do you think the president should have supreme control over all investigations? I mean, I understand that part of keeping the president informed on high publicity cases, it is required. However, at what point must he, one, recuse himself, or must the attorney general say, look, we're not giving you any more information about this case whatsoever? That's what it comes down to me, is if you're conducting an investigation and it leads you back to your boss, why should your boss have the ability to prevent you from continuing on with your investigation? Why should you not be able to question him about that? Especially if, imagine trying to investigate something within your own company. I would assume that you would want the ability to talk to people who are involved. You're going to investigate it, and as you investigate, you find out that it is your boss. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here on my own. So I hope that it's one of those things that we are able to kind of put behind us. I don't agree. As I sit here and I read this, I was starting to waver and think, yeah, maybe he's right, but deep down, I think that I honestly think that that it was decided correctly. I mean, I can understand his point. Should U.S. v. Nixon be overruled on the ground that the case was a non-justable interbranch dispute or intra-branch dispute? Not inter, but intra-branch, so internal. I I don't think so. I don't think it was. I, and this is just a layman's point of view. I don't think it was a non-justable intra-branch dispute because of the fact that he chose to do something that was illegal. This is like saying that the president has the ability to get away with things, and no man is above, no man or woman, no person, whether transgender, non-binary, etc., has the ability to be above the law. Nobody. That's not good practice for any of us. That's not good practice for businesses. It's not a good practice for government officials, whether it be municipalities, state, county, etc. That's got to sound loud. Sorry, that was my fan. But the point I'm trying to make here, and again, this is just my opinion, you can take it or leave it, is that the Nixon case, whether you think right, wrong, or indifferent, is actually, well, in my opinion, it's correct. It was decided correctly. So let's see, what else can we talk about today? I mean, I'm really trying to avoid the Trump treason thing until I can really get into it, because it's not that I'm trying to defend Trump on this at all, to be quite honest. But I just honestly don't have enough information, and treason is a very, very serious charge, and it should not be thrown around lightly. And yet people are throwing it around pretty easily. So I don't know. All right. Let's see here. See, I mean, like, just looking at the various articles right here. Top Intel official says he meant no disrespect to Trump in televised interview discussing the summit with Putin. Donald Trump says he finds it inconceivable that Cohen would tape a client, and Donald Trump says it may have been illegal for his personal lawyer to tape a conversation with him. Wow. All right, let's see here. All right, let's see. Trying to find something to discuss. Well, since there's not a whole lot to discuss, let me go over with you what I'm thinking of doing, both for the YouTube channel itself, as well as my efforts. Is that I want to get more into not just these live weekly, which have actually been bi-weekly the last couple months, just because of work and school scheduling. But I want to get to a point where I can also be making response videos and taking a look at things on a more on a more in-depth look, this last week or so, I have been watching the Monk debate between what were their names? Jordan Peterson, Stephen Fry on the Cohen side, Michael Eric Dyson, and the blogger, her last name is Goldberg. I can't think of her first name right now. I'm sorry, ma'am, if you ever watch this. But I want to take a look at the debate from a layman perspective, like I do with the news. Like, hey, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for you? And that's a 2-hour debate, and I kind of want to break it down, go over their opening statements and stuff. And I want to do that not just for that, but other topics and other things that come up in the world of politics and news. But as I go through school, as I have work, I don't have all the time to do that. So I might do those maybe once a month or so, maybe do like a string where they come out. And I'll give, as I record them, as I do these, I'll record the audio and I'll get that to Dave. And so when I launch those, he can put those up on the, maybe the night before I post the videos. He can have them air on the Podcast 99 network and whatnot. For those of you that don't watch YouTube and whatnot. But at the same time, I'm trying to branch out more and do more, but at the same time not overwork myself, because I do have school. I'm trying to get my degree, and I also have work and responsibilities here too. So, guess I'll talk about really quickly the Trump saying that lawyer taping may be illegal. This actually was posted via the AP 25 minutes ago. The latest on President Trump and his one-time personal attorney, all times local. I'm assuming that these were local East Coast times, but at 4:20 p.m., Trump says that he finds it inconceivable that lawyer would tape a client as the president weighed in on the report of a taped conversation. In the weeks before the 2016 presidential election, his then personal attorney secretly recorded their discussion about a potential payment for former Playboy model's account of having an affair with Trump. We all know about Stormy Daniels. The recording was part of a large collection of documents and electronic records seized earlier this year by the federal authorities from Michael Cohen, a longtime Trump fixer. Why can't they just say lawyer? I mean, honestly, come on. In a tweet Saturday, Trump called such taping totally unheard of and perhaps illegal. He also asserted, without elaborating, in post, the good news is that your favorite president did nothing wrong. Okay. The fact that, quote, in the good news is that your favorite president did nothing wrong, end quote. He's by far not earned, in my opinion, the ability to have the title favorite president yet. There are many more presidents that have done far more than he has that are worth more merit than him from all parties that we've ever had in this nation. So, yeah. 2:45 p.m., attorney Michael Cohen's recording of a conversation with President Donald Trump about payment to a Playboy model adds to the question whether Trump tried to quash damaging stories before the election. Trump campaign had said that it knew nothing about any payment to ex-Senator for Karen McDougal. It could also further entangle the president in a criminal investigation that for months has targeted Cohen. The erstwhile Trump loyalist has hired a new attorney, Clinton White House veteran Lanny Davis, and has disassociated himself from the president as both remain under investigation. Cohen has not been charged with a crime yet. Again, a very important point. Cohen has not been charged yet. Current Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani has said the payment was never made, and the brief recording shows Trump did nothing wrong. I mean, come on, this is all just hearsay at this point until we actually get a hold of the record. the recording, all we can do is make speculation out of this. And speculation does nothing but sway the court of public opinion. And I know that's kind of what the media's point is to, sway public opinion and all that. But honestly, in pure honesty, I just can't stand when you're reporting the news in air quotes, and the news is just, well, he might have done this, or she might have done that, etc., 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 etc. It's not a question of they might have done it. I want to know what they did. And until you can give me hard evidence that proves that fact, I can't accept what you're saying at face value. So I just don't know what to say to people about this. So the whole point of politics, in my opinion, the whole point of the political news landscape is literally a tit for tat. Our candidate who we supported did this, so you must have done this as well, or etc. Or your candidate's evil because they don't agree with our logic, our leaning on a topic. Therefore, he's evil or she's evil, etc. How about we just let the politicians' records stand for themselves? Judging them here and now is not what's going to do any good necessarily. I mean, unless they're actually doing something illegal. But history is going to come out with the truth. They're going to have more access to files that we don't have and that we won't have access to. And they'll judge whether the person was right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, how many of you can actually name all the presidents that we have had without having to go and run to Google or Bing? I mean, I know most of them, but I don't know all of them because some of them just absolutely did nothing during the presidency. Because I can go George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. I want to say it was Monroe next. I mean, that's seriously, I mean, like, having a hard time even memorizing all of them. And I used to be able to say them all at the top of my head quite easily. But now, because I haven't tried immersing myself in it and trying to remember it, the politics, the point that made these men famous for being president or infamous has all gone to the wayside, unless it's something important, unless it's something that comes up every so often. I mean, recently we've had people wanting to take Thomas, not Thomas Jefferson, not Alexander Hamilton. Wow, I cannot speak today. Andrew Jackson off the $20 bill and replace him with people of color, women of color. Okay, that's fine. I mean, we have Benjamin Franklin on the $100 bill, and nothing says that all the coinage has to be, or all the currency has to be of presidents. I'm okay with, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Rosa Parks, any of these people of color, being on our actual currency. Not a problem with that at all. But people don't talk about Andrew Jackson necessarily because of his beliefs in slavery. They talk about him as a war hero for a battle at Louisiana. That was 2 weeks after the signing of the treaty for the War of 1812. But, communications were slow back then. So it cut us some slack. It's just, and it cuts both ways. I mean, the British, defended themselves or attacked us, et cetera, et cetera. Their communications were just as slow as ours. So it's not like we had, high-speed internet and they had dial-up. or vice versa. Anyways, we also remember the bad things, of Jackson, quelling Indian uprisings in Florida, which we didn't own at the time. And once we did get a hold of Florida, we proceeded to march them across the Trail of Tears. And that's a horrible action. Those are horrible actions. But, he also had us at deficit neutral. I mean, we didn't even have a deficit under him. We were able to balance our budget, things like that. There's some good to what he did. But again, people don't remember all the good things about presidents. They don't remember all the bad things about presidents. They just remember what they want to remember. And that's kind of where I'm going with Trump, is that it's not going to be our judgment of Trump that matters in the long run. For those that vilify President Trump, you could be vilified later on in history. You think you're doing the right thing now. You think you're in the right, but it doesn't mean you are. History is what's going to judge us, not ourselves. So keep that in mind as you sit there and talk about. Keep that in mind when you're sitting there talking about political correctness, when you're sitting there talking about President Trump and how he might be a traitor, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not for us necessarily to decide. It's not for you or me to be deciding right now. It'll be for our children's, etc. throughout history. That's when it will be decided whether the person was good or bad. And even then, that might change based upon how history tries to remember things. We sit here and try to judge with our moral values things that happened just a few hundred years ago, and we're appalled by it. But we're okay with things that happened thousands of years ago that were very similar. So I don't know. How we remember history is just really, in and of itself, our own biases and the historians' biases that we follow. Which is rather ironic because that's the class I'm taking is a history class itself. So with that, I am going to go ahead and head out of here and hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Hopefully you're having a good summer, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of the rest of your summer, and that you can enjoy the rest of the year. But I hope you take time to sit back and reflect. Think about that. While yes, your voice is important, your voice needs to be heard. It's not solely up to you or I to decide how history is going to judge us and judge others for its own and its own. So, with that, I would like to say thank you. Have a wonderful night.